Holler at the historic Grandin Theatre is a live storytelling series that's the brainchild of Roanoker Lee Hunsaker. The theme for this episode is the body. Tellers share tales of lost limbs, negative attitudes about our own bodies, and how to overcome medical and psychological adversity. Blue Ridge PBS Echo is pleased to share these moving stories. Please note that the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Blue Ridge PBS or the Echo channel, and be advised that some of the stories contain graphic language and stories about mental and physical abuse, so viewer discretion is advised.
I was thinking about this particular theme for tonight, the body, and I was thinking about that word in the last couple of days a lot. And I think when we think about the body, we think about the vessel in which our soul is contained. But I was also thinking about how that word is used as well. And I was thinking about bodies of water. My 4-year-old daughter is named Bay, B-A-Y. Not after Chesapeake or Hudson or Bay of Fundy, just Bay, because we love the idea of her being this placid soul, or also being this torrid wave. And I was also thinking about the word body in the realm of body of work. And then I thought about a lot what we do in this building. And I want you all to recognize that you are also a body of individuals who make up this event. You're a body of people here. And when I think about the body of work that we try to do here, one of our goals is to make sure that we bring bodies into this building for 3 reasons. 1, entertainment. And you would think from the outside that that's probably the most important thing that we do, but for us it's the 3rd most important thing we do. The second thing that we do when we bring bodies into this building is education, because we want you to learn something or multiple things. And the first most important thing that we do at the Grandin Theatre is we create social discourse. We want you to come into this room and experience what we do, and we want you to walk out. We want you to share it. We want it to affect your lives in positive ways. So you are a body of individuals who are here to experience Hoot and Holler, the body, and be our body while we share our stories about the body. And for that, we thank you, and give yourself a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Landon.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, dad joke. So my name is Tom Landon. I am a sometimes storyteller at Hoot and Holler, but not tonight. And I also work for Blue Ridge PBS. I want to ask you guys a couple questions. First of all, how many of you, by show of hands, give money to National Public Radio and WVTF? That's fantastic. They're awesome. How many of you know that when you give money to WVTF, which is a fantastic organization, and we should all support them, and I do, you are not giving any money to public television? So I'm not going to embarrass you by saying how many of you give money to Blue Ridge Public Television, but we know our numbers are lower than those that give to public radio. And I'm just here to tell you that we rely on you guys. So I run one of our streaming channels called Blue Ridge PBS Echo. Is anybody familiar with Echo? Great. And Echo is a hyper-local streaming channel that carries as much local productions as we can afford to make or that people give us at no cost. One of the very first things we started recording when we launched, and I'm joined here by my coworkers Sadie Pettit and Andy Depew, who are on the production team, and a couple others from development. One of the first things we did was start recording Hoot and Hollers. Yes. Nobody asked us to, and nobody paid us to. And for the last couple years, we have done that on a consistent basis. Last year, we lost $1 million in funding from the state. We haven't really talked about that much because we're trying to get through it. But you all need to know that the quality, educational, instructional, artistic programming that Blue Ridge PBS has brought you since 1967 doesn't just happen. and it requires funding. And what I'm here specifically to do tonight, in addition to give out free T-shirts in the lobby, if you'll say something nice about us on camera, is to make a plea that someone in this audience either can or knows someone who can fund the production of Hoot and Hollers here at the Grandin Theatre, because we can't afford to do it for free. And it's not that expensive, and I'm happy to talk to you about it, as is Richard and Susanna in the lobby. But we need somebody to step up, because we've been doing this for 2 years. We've got 5 people here tonight, and all of them get paid, including me. So we need your support. If you're not a member, please join. Now, the last thing I want you to do to get us fired up for Hoot and Holler, because that's kind of a bummer, we are recording in the lobby. We asking people to come up and say, "Hi, my name's Tom Landon, and I love Blue Ridge PBS because of its quality local programming." You wouldn't say that. You would come up with your own thing. But what I want to do is, I'm recording right now, and I would like everyone, we'll try it twice. I think we're going to need twice, but we're going to do it once. We're going to practice, just like Lee does with her storytellers. And on the count of 3, you're going to say, "I love Blue Ridge PBS." Okay? Let's try that in 1, 2, 3.
That's not bad.
Not bad. We could crisp it up just a little. I love Blue Ridge PBS.
1, 2, 3. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Landon. Without further ado, live at the Grandin Theatre, please welcome Hoot and Holler, the Body.
Hi, folks. My name is Nadine. I sometimes go by Doc McClintock on stage. But tonight, I'm just Nadine for you folks. As a transgender person, I am asked to live bravely in this world. To walk to the store, to eat at a restaurant, to use a public restroom, it all comes pre-packaged with fear and uncertainty. That is, if I choose to bear it all and live my truth on the surface of my body for all to see. And that is ideally how we all should be living, bare and free. But we're told that our bodies aren't appropriate for the public eye. We are seen as a condition, as mentally ill, or even deformed from our use of medicines to shape our bodies into the gender of our choosing. We trade one comfort for another, gaining a body that feels more like home, only to be told that what we're doing is lying or that we're somehow trying to deceive people. Our bodies become something to be concealed and to be shamed of. I'm here tonight on this stage to tell you that my trans body isn't shameful. No one's body is. We are all beautiful, miraculous creatures, and anyone that dares to say otherwise just hasn't gotten a chance to love themselves yet. This song that I'm about to sing is about proving to the world that my body and my experience isn't just one big attempt to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. I deserve to live in this world in the body of my choosing. My body is the truth, and I refuse to hide it. This song is called Labels Don't Come Cheap. All right, can we hear that back there? Okay. My love has been asking for a lot. She wants the truth, and the truth I ain't got. I've got tales to spin myself and lies I repeat. Which story do you want this time? One day I promise that I'll be bigger than this. These trials and troubles and counterfeits, all I'm really searching for is comfort before I'm given death's sweet embrace. If I find it, well, I might just call it home. Maybe if I put up a sign, someone else will come and lay their head down with mine and buy into my bullshit after all. They say the word on the street is that labels don't come cheap. Can't buy a new name need a place to sleep. Might just as well sink into the ground beneath my feet till I tell a lie that everybody else believes. I think I've about had enough of my actions hurting the ones that I love. About high time that I wrangled her in. This devil inside of me and the mess she's been. I say that I keep trying, and that's what I want to believe. But something tells me, darling, that it's plain to see. I'm a reactor core in meltdown, and I'm about to hit the floor. And soon enough, no one's gonna come around here no more. They say the word on the street is that labels don't come cheap. Can't buy a new name when you need a place to sleep. Might just as well sink into the ground beneath my feet until I tell a lie that everybody else believes. Until I tell a lie that everybody else believes. Thank you, folks. Got Lee Hunsaker about to come up here and introduce the show to you guys.
Y'all, Nadine Martin. Hi, everybody. Hey, I'm Lee Hunsaker. Can we please, Nadine Martin, y'all? Just one. So having Nadine, having everyone here is the perfect time for me to say that this entire show is an invitation. And that invitation is to open our hearts and our minds and lean in, as I always ask of you, and you always do, because we have the best freaking audience ever, and understand where these beautiful stories are coming from, and open yourself up to listening, deep, deep listening. That's what storytelling is, right? So, this show, man, every show, but this show, getting this together, curating this show has been one of the most special and humbling and my greatest honor. Putting these people together, sorry, I'm spitting into the microphone. Assembling these beautiful humans that you're gonna witness tonight has been so humbling and such a beautiful experience. Curating the show is always electrifying and tricky and hard and beautiful. And we had over 40 submissions for this show, which is like a world's record. And I wish that I could have all of us up here. I wish we could just stay here all weekend and just do what we do and get down and dirty and talk about it. But but these beautiful 12 people are our shining stars for now. We're working on super exciting ways, which I will share right after intermission, about what we're going to do to get more people up on the stage. But that's for later. It's a little teaser for you. Let's see. Let me see. I want to, of course, thank the Grandin, our beautiful home stage. I mean, and yeah, the staff and volunteers. I want to thank Echo for coming and recording us and preserving these stories. Sam Lunsford, our DJ. So I want to jump right in because, of course, we have a lot to get through, and I want everybody to stay here all night. So I have more things to say, and I'm sure I'll cry like I always do, and blah. But but thank you so much for your support. I mean, we sold the show out like a month ago, y'all, because of you. So thank you for understanding the power of live stories. It's just incredible. I mean, here we all are on a school night, and y'all just keep showing up. And I hope and I assume there's lots of new people out there, and so welcome to you, and welcome to all of you who keep coming back. Every show has a different flavor, and this one is no different. It's special. What I do want to say, and I'm not going to say this again tonight, but I do want to say, I assume, and I should read the 4 agreements, I assume that you understand that buying a ticket to a live storytelling performance, and especially if you've been to Hoot and Holler before, we are grown-ups, and we're going to talk like grown-ups in here.
Thank you.
And especially stories about the body, you know what I'm saying? So I just want to put that out there as a blanket thing. I don't want to diminish or make small of that, but please protect yourself if you feel, that a story is not sitting well with you. Please take care of yourself, and we will take care of each other. But I'm just putting that out there as a blanket statement. We are telling grown-up stories here. Okay? Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna go. I got more, but here we go. Okay, storyteller number 1. It's very brave to go first. I mean, it's brave to go ever, but it's really brave to go first, okay? So, okay. All right. She is thrilled to be joining us for a second evening of storytelling and meaningful connection. As a family physician practicing in Roanoke for over 20 years, she has come to deeply appreciate the art of storytelling through her work with patients. Her favorite part of the job is the unexpected stories shared in the exam room. Holding space for people to find language to express their truths has incredible healing power, and that is the truth. Desiring more time for this sacred work, she recently opened her own concierge practice, Ultra Primary Care, at the Center for Ultra Health right in Old Southwest. There, she incorporates life coaching. When she isn't with patients or crafting her own tales, you'll likely find her on a soul-nourishing hike, paddle-boarding the river, or mountain biking with the wind in her hair. Please welcome, second-timer, but first tonight, Christy Arthur.
Yay! Thank you all. It's so exciting to be here. Yay! Yay! So I wanted to start off talking a little bit about bad tattoos. Kind of common, right? I can relate. I kind of have a tattoo, but I didn't get to choose it. I got it for free. And I got it way underage, and I didn't consent either. And I was born with a birthmark right here in the middle of my neck. Yeah, there you can see it. And, you know, to be fair, this birthmark is pretty small and easily covered, and maybe even a little bit cute, kind of looks like a V or an L. But nonetheless, this birthmark has led to the story of my life, which is, what's that on your neck? But the answer to that story is a little bit more complicated. So one way to answer that question is through the medical lens, which is to say this is a port wine stain, or a nevus flammeus, which is a congenital low-flow vascular malformation of the capillaries and post-capillary venules of the dermal layer. Did that answer it for you? So that's a lot of medical lingo that basically means that the smallest blood vessels are larger than they should be, so they hold more blood and they look darker. Now, if this mark had been over my eyelids, the doctors might have considered a diagnosis of Sturge-Weber, which is a congenital disorder associated with strokes and seizures. And if the mark had been over my lower back, they might have considered spinal bifida occulta, which is just a failure of the vertebral bodies to close completely. And I just bring all of that up to say that doctors look at things like birthmarks as clues to something worse or something that needs to be fixed. But this misshapen capillary definition, while it might be 100% scientifically accurate, doesn't even begin to answer the question of what's that on your neck. To do that, we need to go back in time to when I was 3 or 4, and I was going to Little Angels preschool at a local church. And I only remember a couple of things about this preschool. The first is that we were basically little devils, and we ran around the sanctuary, we hid under the pews, and we basically forced our teacher into a game of hide and seek every day. And the second is a classmate looking at my neck and saying, "What's that on your neck?" And I looked around and in fact realized that not everybody has a red mark on their neck. And I got home and asked my mom, I said, "Mom, why do I have this birthmark?" And she said, "Oh, that? Well, Christy, before you were even born, when you were up in heaven, you were just crying and making such a fuss. The angels picked you up and they rocked you in their arms and they gave you a kiss on the neck, and it left that birthmark after you were born." I was like, whoa. I've been kissed by the angels. Oh my goodness. I thought a lot of that, went and told all my classmates the angel kiss story. And it was my first foray into the power of story and how it can change your whole outlook. And, you know, I'm so grateful that my mom chose such a story of care. She could have easily been, you know, ashamed or made me wear turtlenecks all the time. But instead, she gave me a story of acceptance and love, and it really helped me to cherish and appreciate this thing that makes me so different. Until I got to upper elementary school, and the question, "What's that on your neck?" morphed into, "Do you have a hickey?" So I didn't know what a hickey was. And of course I said, "What? No, this is where the angels kissed me." Yeah. By that time in my life, that was like admitting I still believed in Santa. So I went home and asked my mom another question. "Mom, what's a hickey? And did you lie to me about the angels?" So this birthmark led to my first sex ed discussion, followed by something even more horrifying, an admission from my mom that she had, in fact, made up the angel story. I know, I felt not so special. But she, in her defense, she said, "Well, Christy, we can't be sure. I mean, maybe you were kissed by the angels. We can't verify it." At that point in time, this birthmark seemed more like an L for the big lie. I made it through high school. I did learn what a real hickey was. And by that point in time, nobody was really asking questions. I still saw people looking. Maybe they were assuming it was a real hickey and I was a slut, but I was having way too much fun to really care. When I got to UVA, I told everybody that it was a V for Virginia. Woo! I know, we're in tech country, but it became, at that point in time, the ultimate symbol of belonging. And honestly, I didn't really think too much about it until I was in medical school and I did my plastic surgery rotation. And remember how I started off this story with the medical explanation that slides into the, "Well, what else is wrong with you?" angle? Well, not one, not two, but 3 different plastic surgery residents told me, "You know, we can get rid of that thing for you." Honestly, they were really just looking for any excuse to use their brand new toy, which was this like high-powered laser that could basically get rid of any blemish with just one zap. Well, I don't think I need to tell you, but I, of course, turned them down cold. Laser or not, those guys were really missing the point. So now that I'm nearing 50 and my hair is graying and I'm getting some wrinkles and my middle's bulging, I've really come to appreciate this birthmark that hasn't changed my entire life. So last year I did something scary and I started my own practice, and at times it's felt really dizzying with all the change. And this birthmark has been an anchor back to myself. It's like the spot on the wall that dancers use when they're spinning so fast so that they don't fall. So these days, this birthmark is a soft heart. It's a reminder to be gentle to myself and to be kind in the midst of all that is changing. So, to answer that question, what's that on your neck? Well, it's a bunch of misshapen capillaries. It's an angel's kiss, a hickey, a symbol of belonging, a heart, and a divine, but still non-consensual, tattoo of acceptance.
All right. So our next teller is a first-time teller, which always equals the extra and the extra and the extra love. This man has made me cry a time or 12 with his beautiful soul, and you're going to be able to feel that right away, but I won't spoil it. He moved to Cave Spring 2 years ago with his husband from San Diego, California, where they lived for 30 years. Before that, he lived in Seattle, Washington for 15, and that is where his story tonight took place. This is his first time on the Hoot and Holler stage. I have pushed him, and I have pushed him. Some of you may know that I'm sometimes referred to as a story doula or midwife, and I hit the Pitocin on this guy, okay? So lean in with the love, y'all. Luke Terpstra.
Thank you. That felt really good. It feels great to be here. Look, Ma. My career as an orthopedic technician all started back in the senior year of high school. I answered an ad for a new training program at the large Catholic hospital in my hometown in Michigan. The training was to assist orthopedic surgeons in all types of bone fracture management, applying traction, applying casts, and assisting in surgery. I was accepted into the training program and fell in love with the work immediately. My early training and years of experience led me to my job at Children's Hospital in Seattle, Washington. I worked at Children's for about 5 years in the 80s. I was a cast and brace technician in the birth defects clinic. And I would like to start out by reading a poem that was written for me by one of my patients' grandfathers. And the poem is entitled Luke. 1,000 men like Gunga Din, heroes of story ever told. But the heroes for me seldom you see or read about in headlines bold. Like one who works with children, by chance I came to know, down at Children's Hospital, where my grandson has to go. Each day Luke with trouble works, and sights are sometimes grim. There with hands both swift and sure, Luke works to help kids mend, ever chasing their fears away with the most impish of grins. So from my grandson and me, we both guarantee Luke's a hero, a man among men, by Harry Jacobson. And Harry's grandson, Adam, was one of my patients who had to have serial casting in preparation for surgery for untreated clubfoot. It was always Harry who brought Adam into the clinic, so we became good friends. This is a cartoon, a Larson cartoon that I had in my cast room for many years. Let's get this baby off the ground. It was a favorite. We treated a number of congenital defects, including spina bifida, hip dysplasia, and the common one was clubfoot. My job was to apply serial casting to correct the deformities. Then while the plaster was setting up, I continued to mold correction into the foot. When the plaster was set up, they were good to go for 2 weeks. When they came back, and we did it all over again. The cast had to be removed with a cast saw, which was quite loud and created a lot of vibration. And I always told Mom that the saw would only tickle, but the babies didn't like it a bit. The serial casting started when the baby was about 1 week old, then changed every 2 weeks to accommodate their growth and to continue correcting the deformity. Normally, the children would come to the clinic for these serial casts, but in the event of severe deformity, I would go to University Hospital and start casting babies at about 3 days old before they went home. This is how they would start their lives, being tugged on, pried, manipulated, and stretched. I would, of course, be as gentle as possible, but many times they would look up at me as if to say, "Really, dude, is all this necessary?" Little did they know that we would develop a close bond for the next 2 years. And another very important bond that was needed to be forged was with the parents and the siblings. I had to let them know that I was on their side and we were all in this together. They were scared and unsure and had many questions and concerns. I also needed their help to get through this. I needed them to hold and console the crying baby so we could get through the treatment. I had to be honest and thorough and kind. I needed them to trust me. And most of them were able to overlook my ponytail and earring. My cast room was large with 5 exam tables that were filled with babies, surrounded by moms and siblings, and was busy, noisy, and chaotic. I would introduce everyone to each other so they could see that there were different stages of treatment and exam visits, and that they were not alone. It was also very helpful for them to compare notes. We started with serial casting, and then at about 6 months, they would get corrective surgery. When they came back for their post-op exam, they would have 2 or 3 stainless steel pins sticking out of their forefoot that had to be pulled. And the best way to do this was by sneak attack. That is, tell mom what you're going to do, have her hold the baby while you grab the foot with one hand and grab the pin with the pliers and pull. I know. But when it was over, and it was like a pinch. They would be casted for another week or 2, and then they would go into removable night splints, which made life a little easier, and they could get on with their next big steps, which we called ambulation. It would be a big deal when at around 2 years of age, they could throw those miserable night splints away. And finish up this long, seemingly never-ending process. All these stages would be marked as milestones that we would celebrate with cheers and high fives. It was always mind-blowing watching them grow, learn, and develop their personalities. They weren't like other kids. They learned to read earlier. Their ABCs and numbers came sooner. To say nothing about coping. These kids could cope. We had stimulating conversations about how they would look out their windows to watch neighbor kids and siblings run and play with reckless abandon, and they would wonder, what would that feel like? We would talk about what they could do when people stared. Not just other children, but adults. And they wondered why adults did not have better manners. I do too. I suggested that they ask the adults that if they have any questions to go along with their stares, that you would be happy to enlighten them. And quite often they were happy just to say, take a picture, it'll last longer. One day I was talking to one of my patients, an adorable young lady about 5 years old. And she was fascinated with a little gold pirate earring that I was wearing. And finally she said, "Are you gay or what?" And laughing, I said, "You got me." Yes, I sure am gay. And she said, I knew it. And her mother said, that's my daughter, 5, going on 20. Children's Hospital encouraged staff to dress up for Halloween in some kind of a suitable costume to entertain the kids. One year, I dressed up as a witch doctor. I danced around their exam tables and shook a baby rattle, conjuring up some kind of magic spell. We laughed and laughed. Many friends would confide in me that they just couldn't work in such a sad and hopeless situation. And hopeless was not a word that I would ever use in the birth defects clinic. I found it to be just the opposite. The word I use is hopeful. Most of these kids had so much spirit, and they picked up the cards that they were dealt and they played the game. Harry, whose poem I read earlier so eloquently, said that I was a hero because of my work with crippled children. And while that means so much to me, I have to say that it was the children who are the heroes for their bravery and courage. Thank you.
So proud and beautiful. Woo. Okay, here we go. Y'all signed up for this, so come on. All right, bring it. We are bringing it. Next story, another first timer. Ooh. This one. They're all lean-inable. So, yeah, you know what to do. Y'all are so beautiful out there. He's a longtime Roanoker who cringes when asked to write a bio. Because literally, I had to ask him like an hour before the show, like, come on. And so this is the bio. This is his first time telling at Hoot and Holler, but he spent years practicing around the campfire. There's so much more to this beautiful human, and you're about to learn it. Lean in and love him, Seth Marlowe.
I can't see anything, which I anticipated, but here we are. Also, probably a lot of you know me just because this is Roanoke, and thanks. You won't be surprised to hear that I don't have this fully committed to memory. So I'm going to rely, I've got like a couple different aids over here to go for. So I'll just jump in. The fertility clinic is styled like a spa. The vibe for the most part is chill, but scattered throughout are copies of a book my doctor has written called The Art of Living with Intent. On the cover, he appears with his arms thrust over his head, Victory V, and the same image appears at a larger size throughout the clinic, emblazoned, To Life. Sharing the walls, his original artwork. Ambiguously floral paintings with a kind of Georgia O'Keeffe vibe about them. As we pass the third or fourth such work, my wife whispers, "Do you think these are portraits?" There's also a pool shaped like a uterus with little offshoot ovary tubs. But I didn't see that part because I don't think that the dads go back there. So, but I actually went a lot of places the dads didn't go. So maybe I should have asked. I spent my life expecting a child. expecting specifically to be a mother. On the day I was born and the doctor announced to the room that I was a girl, two things happened. One, my father, a man who already had 3 sons, nearly fainted. And two, an invisible list of expectations for every aspect of my future unfurled beneath the name they gave me. I would fall short of most of them, or outright decline them, or openly chafe as I struggled to meet them. But I never second-guessed the idea that I was born to be a parent. So many trappings of girlhood I embraced as a survival mechanism. But the baby doll, the little bed, the bottle that seemed to empty when tipped into a plastic mouth, these things did come naturally to me. That I was not a girl dawned on me as a slow and miserable realization. Trans representation at the end of the 20th century was heavily weighted toward daytime talk shows featuring trans women in scandalous outfits, situations, and families. I don't know when I learned that trans men also existed, only that once I knew, I could not unknow it, even as I desperately hoped to avoid such a fate for myself. It took years for me to accept that it could not be avoided, and even once I saw it clearly, I was terrified of transition. I had more reasons, but top among them was the child I had always thought I would have. Comprehensive care for transgender people remains an elusive goal even 20 years later, but at the turn of the century, any care at all felt almost unattainable. To find a doctor who would prescribe hormones often required checking one's humanity at the door and submitting to all manner of questioning and disdain, for which it was implied that you should be grateful. Certainly no one was asking trans people about our hopes to have a family. In much of the United States, medical sterilization was required to update documentation that allows people to move through the world, from driver's licenses to passports. So it wasn't just implied that trans people shouldn't have children. In many ways, it was required. So this was the context in which I made the decision to medically transition, and in which I grieved the possibility of ever being a parent, because this was also a time when queers were not allowed to adopt children, and every door seemed closed. But I knew that I would not survive without transition, and I counted my fertility and my future as a parent among its costs. 10 years later, when my wife and I started dating, we had a careful conversation about what it might mean to have a family. By then, the world had changed enough that it seemed we could be parents. And by then, I was a man, indistinguishable from other men. But something about me had not changed. Harboring an impossible wish for a child, I had kept my ovaries. I sketched out my pipe dream. I knew that I could not carry a pregnancy. For me, it would create dissonance and dysphoria that would be intolerable. But I could, one time, undergo a cycle of egg retrieval. The embryos that resulted, if any, didn't need my uterus. What if she had a baby and the baby was mine? Without hesitating, she said, "Of course." I know now that this is called reciprocal IVF, and that an increasing number of lesbian couples have created their families this way. But at the time, I did not know anything except that it seemed possible. Certainly, I didn't know other trans men who had become fathers in this way, although I knew a few who had carried pregnancies before transitioning. Using my eggs would mean stopping the testosterone shots I had done weekly for more than a decade, and waiting for something I could only think of as the systems firing back up, which I would know had happened when I started menstruating again, which was a specter I tried to avoid thinking about. It did seem like it should go pretty quickly, a few months, one doctor guessed, and knowing that we were going to pursue this care, I had taken a job that was headquartered in Massachusetts, where they have a mandate for insurance coverage of fertility treatment. So I had already stopped testosterone when we got the first insurance denial. I didn't start again because it seemed like surely this was going to be resolved quickly because I'd read the policy really carefully. It did not resolve quickly, but hope that it would kept me off of hormone injections. And at each delay, it seemed foolish to go back on them because I needed to be ready at the moment we got an approval. The year that followed is hard to remember. I've left a lot of it behind. I don't remember when my period came back, but I do remember the moment I furiously thought, how the do women do this every single month? When the final denial came, it felt like a relief. The slow tidal shift in my body had left me feeling displaced and disoriented. I was so tired of waiting. Having exhausted our appeals for insurance coverage, we resigned ourselves to paying out of pocket, and we emptied our meager retirement funds and maxed out our credit cards. The clinic we used was in central New York, chosen for their relative affordability in a sea of unchecked parental aspiration. Telehealth was years from establishing itself as a mainstream service, and my appointments were conducted by voice-only phone calls. The doctor's faceless, oracular confidence about his protocol's success kind of left the impression that my care was being managed by the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Then the boxes of meds started arriving. Vials of oil and powders with mixing liquids, all nested in handfuls of individually wrapped syringes and alcohol swabs. Each time a package arrived, I thought of the ads in the back of the Boys' Life magazines I had loved when I was a kid. They promised you could build yourself a hovercraft using the plans they sent you and the motor of a household vacuum cleaner. With the right directions and some salvage parts, you could make something amazing with what you already had. A mail-order miracle. The protocol was weeks of shots and ultrasound monitoring, and I spent what felt like hours in waiting rooms filled with women. Then hours more staring at inscrutable, static-y images of my ovaries and trying to discern what they meant. At the end, a trigger shot causes one final push of egg development and starts a 36-hour countdown to retrieval. I don't remember the drive to New York, but I do remember the morning of the procedure, which I spent smoking a joint in the hotel parking lot to calm my nerves. At the clinic, I bypassed the uterus relaxation pool. Ambiguous oil paintings brightened the hallway to the procedure room. And by the time I was gowned up and sliding down the exam table, anesthesia had plied me with benzos, and I had just enough time to ask one burning question before going under. Hey, I managed to slur. Does it get weird looking at vaginas all day? No, that's the answer. The answer is no. Some of you may know that already. The retrieval resulted in 21 eggs, which is a number so high I made them repeat it 3 times before I believed I wasn't still under sedation. 16 of them fertilized, and of those, 13 grew for 5 days in a lab before being frozen. 2 years later, after our second embryo transfer, we were expecting a baby. This is the first moment I saw my son. Today, my son is 8 years old. He's all front teeth and a cascading mullet of dark hair tangling down his back. When his brow furrows, he is the picture of my father. He's bright and funny and sometimes difficult. And still, when he falls asleep at night, he reaches out to hold my hand.
So beautiful, right, y'all? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're rolling. That was freaking incredible. I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to do this. Okay. This human would not write me a bio, so I'm riffing, as they say, which I've had to do, I believe we counted 8 times now. This genius is a fan favorite if you are a regular to Hoot and Holler, and our shows just simply would not be the same without him. I adore him and his spirit and his humor and his wit and his storytelling prowess. Please welcome to the stage, Joe Stanley.
Boy, I have something that I never thought I'd stand in front of a crowd of people this size and admit. I'm fat. I was a fat baby. And I grew into a fat kid. My eating habits were no different from anyone else's. Sun up to sundown, I was outside ripping and running with the rest of the kids. And to me, fat was never a judgment. It was just another word. Tall, skinny, smart, kind. Fat was just a word. Until my 7th birthday. It was a tradition in my family that my grandmother baked everyone a cake, and it was always sour cream pound cake, and it was incredible. And she would take each cake and she would specialize it for you. On my 7th birthday, she decided to make me a cake in the shape of a bottle of diet pills. And even though I cried, you can see it says, on that side it says, take one after each birthday. The other side said, take one and lose weight. And I cried, but I was forced to take a picture with the cake. And then after that, everyone was cut a piece of the cake except for me. My grandmother said the last thing I needed was cake, and then she quoted the Bible about gluttony. That's the first time I ever hated myself. I hated my body, and I hated myself. Because whether you're 7 or you're 53, how the hell do you separate the two? But now that I'm 53, the question I ask is, why in the hell would someone ever make you want to? Amen. Thank you.
Is there any truer truth than that? What a brave and incredible story. Thank you, Joe. We love you. Oof. Okay, we have 2 more, and then we're going to take a break, and then we have, we're just continuing to blow minds, y'all. So, how are you doing? How are you? Okay. It's just like non-stop up in her. Okay. Our next storyteller, second-time Hoot and Holler storyteller. She's a Roanoke native and proud mother of 3, second-time storyteller, and excited to be back on the Hoot and Holler stage. Also, this would be a time for a potential trigger warning, just to be aware. Please welcome outspoken, beautiful Kaisha Preston.
My name is Kaisha Preston, and I am a domestic violence survivor. That is an important and relevant part of this particular story. However, that is not the entirety of my story. In 2016, I ended an abusive relationship with no job, $0 in the bank, and 3 kids who I needed to take care of. I was subjected to extreme post-relationship abuse, which took the form of financial sabotage, and ultimately resulted in my home going into foreclosure and my credit getting completely destroyed. For about a full year after figuring out that I wasn't going to be able to save my house, I applied for various apartments on an almost daily basis, like it was my full-time job. And despite the fact that by that time I had gotten a really good job and I was more than capable of paying rent, I kept consistently getting turned away because I did not meet the credit check requirements. The clock was ticking for me and my kids to leave our home, and I was quickly running out of options. So with 2 weeks left before we literally would have been out on the street, I caved in and I contacted a slumlord. We moved into a home with faulty electricity and a roof that was on the verge of caving in. I actually believe it finally did cave in about a week after we left. We hated every moment of being in that particular home, but the alternative was going into a shelter or pitching a tent on the side of the road, so we were grateful for it. In 2019, I felt a responsibility to make sure that what happened to me didn't happen to anyone else, so I wrote a bill, and I changed state law to prevent victims of financial abuse from facing housing discrimination as a result of their abusers ruining their credit. In February of 2020, that bill became state law, and a few weeks later, I was invited by National Network to End Domestic Violence to speak as a panelist in a congressional briefing on violence against women to share my experience with congressmen and their staffers. I got that invite, and I remember thinking, wow, 2020 is going to be the best year ever, right? Around that time, there were also murmurs on the news about COVID-19, but at that point, it hadn't made its way to America yet, and we were still being told that it probably wasn't anything we needed to worry about. So on the day of my congressional briefing, I remember walking through the halls of the House of Representatives and for the first time ever seeing people greet each other with elbow bumps opposed to shaking hands. There was a feeling of concern and almost panic in the air, and I remember for the first time ever feeling genuinely afraid and thinking to myself, If these people who are running the country are this uneasy right now, this might actually be something that we need to take seriously. I delivered my speech, I hopped on the Amtrak, I came back home, I walked through my door, I turned on the news, and literally, as soon as I got back home from DC, a stay-at-home order was issued. Some people put their bodies to good use during the lockdown, exercising, getting stuff done around the house. I was not one of those people. I sat my body on the couch and I binge watched The Tiger King. Did y'all hear they found Carol Baskin's husband alive this year? I know, I was honestly a little disappointed. I was low-key rooting for her to have fed him to the tigers. I'm an introvert and an extremely, almost always exhausted single mom of 3, and I am very much at peace with never leaving my house. So when they told us to stay at home, honestly, I was just like, bet, this is my moment to shine. With the exception of occasionally leaving my house to go fight people over the last roll of toilet paper, I, for the most part, stayed put. My midsection, however, did not. I gained about 40 pounds during the lockdown, but as somebody who identifies as incredibly body positive, I honestly never felt self-conscious about it. Not until about 2 years later, when I got an invite to speak at a celebrity fundraising dinner in New York. I woke up one morning in late August with an email from a woman named Celine Bonner. She was in Paris, France, and according to this email, she was the president and CEO of the Caring Foundation. If you're not familiar with the Caring Foundation, they are the parent company that owns all the major luxury fashion brands like Gucci, Alexander McQueen, YSL. According to this email, they were hosting a celebrity fundraising dinner at the conclusion of Fashion Week New York, and I was being invited to deliver the keynote address. I just knew this was a phishing scam. I actually almost deleted the email and sent it to spam until I read at the very end of it that their charitable cause was domestic violence and that the funds that they were raising were going to be benefiting National Network to End Domestic Violence. At that point, I made the connection and figured, you know what, this might be real and it might be worth giving this woman a call. So I downloaded WhatsApp, I called this woman in France, and I found out at that point that apparently Selma Hayek and Samuel L. Jackson were co-chairing the event, and somehow they had seen my remarks that I delivered to Congress and decided that they needed me to be present for this event. The next thing you know, I'm on a first-class flight to New York City. I'm being booked in a luxury suite. I'm given my own personal driver for the week. I've got my own personal glam squad who are going to be doing my hair and makeup for the event. And they're sending me to Bloomingdale's with a personal shopper and no budget to buy any dress that I want for the event. Did I mention I had no budget? It felt like my own personal Cinderella moment, and I felt so important and so excited, and then the day of the event arrives, and it was a back-to-back series of unfortunate events. First, I get to Bloomingdale's, where I discover that my personal shopper is double booked. That really wasn't a big deal. I feel like I've been training my whole life to go shopping with no budget and someone else's credit card. So I eagerly started browsing and very quickly discovered that this store has absolutely nothing I like that comes in larger than a size 12. Once upon a time in my life, I could fit into a size 8, but by this time, post-pandemic, I'm wearing about a size 14. Still no big deal, I'm thinking to myself. I am in one of the largest cities in the world. This is one of the fashion capitals in the world. I'm on 59th and Lexington, which happens to be a fashion district. So I just leave and go to one of the other stores in the vicinity, and I feel very confident that I'll be able to find something to wear. And to my surprise, I experienced the exact same dilemma everywhere else. Nothing that I like in my size. So now I'm starting to think maybe I'm just being picky. So I head back into Bloomingdale's and I start browsing through all of the dresses, not just the ones that catch my eye. And it becomes clear to me at this point that this store actually has nothing in my size. I did manage to find one dress that I liked that was a size 14, but it was this ugly Kermit the Frog green. And I absolutely hate the color green. So I wasn't even gonna toy with the idea of trying it on. I've been shopping for about 4 hours at this point, and I have about an hour and a half before I have to be in hair and makeup. New York City traffic is gonna take up at least 30 minutes of that, so now I am panicking. I start calling the event organizers, and I'm telling them about my dilemma, so they start scrambling and trying to figure out if they know anyone last minute who might be able to produce a dress that we can borrow. We do not have any luck. I hang up the phone with them, and now I have a full-blown meltdown. I am now sitting in the middle of the floor at Bloomingdale's, Kim Kardashian ugly crying. Finally, my personal shopper is free, so she rushes over to pull me up out of the floor, and she hands me a handful of dresses that she's picked out for me. Size 10, size 12, size 10, size 12, and that ugly Kermit the Frog green dress. I tell her absolutely not to the green dress, and I reiterate that I cannot fit anything a size 12 or below. So she tells me it's fine, we'll throw a few pairs of Spanx on, and worst case scenario, we have a seamstress on site who can come do alterations and let one of the dresses out for me. So I head to the dressing room, and I actually do manage to squeeze one of the dresses on with like 4 pairs of Spanx. I look amazing, but I cannot breathe. And that is not conducive to giving a speech. So we take that off, and now the seamstress has come into my dressing room. She is literally trying to cut and sew me into a dress. Finally, she completely gives up, and we have figured out that this isn't gonna work. So at this point, I have about 45 minutes until I have to be in hair and makeup, and so I'm just like, you know what? Give me the green dress. I take it and I check out. I did not even try it on. There wasn't any time. So at this point, I just needed anything to wear. My perfect day felt ruined. My confidence had been crushed. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt absolutely horrible about the body that I was in. So we get to hair and makeup, and it actually goes incredibly well. My hair and makeup turns out fabulously, and that lifts my spirits just a little bit. But now I have to go finish getting ready, and it's time for me to put on this dress. And I did not try it on while I was inside of the store, so I have no idea if it's gonna work or not. So I go into the bathroom, I put on the dress. It does fit, but I am entirely too anxious to look. I have no idea if it's flattering. I absolutely hate the color. So I finally work up the courage to step out of the bathroom, and my hair and makeup artists are just looking at me with their mouths wide open, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's actually that bad. So now I'm coming up with a plan in my head, and I'm like, if this dress doesn't fit, or if it doesn't look well, what am I gonna do? Is there a way I can dress up a pair of the jeans that I have in my bag that I brought with me on the plane? Yeah. It's New York City, and fashion there is weird. Maybe I can just put on a robe and make that look formal somehow. So finally, one of my hair and makeup artists speaks, and they're like, oh my God, look at you. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to look at some point. I know it's awful. So I finally muster up the courage. And I take a look in the mirror. And it is the most perfect dress I ever could have worn. So I arrived to this event where I walked the red carpet with Selma Hayek. I took pictures with Emma Watson. I sat directly across from Leonardo DiCaprio and Queen Rania of Jordan. And the entire evening, this room full of billionaires and celebrities are just complimenting me on how amazing I look in this dress and how well that ugly Kermit the Frog green complements my skin. And I felt absolutely amazing. I felt great getting compliments all night from this room full of New York's elite and some of the most powerful people who were in the room. But honestly, in that moment, what I looked like was the furthest thing from my mind. In that moment, I thought about everything that I had to overcome to get there, from my frantic hunt to find a dress that fit me, to leaving a relationship that made me feel so incredibly small. And in that moment, I felt like the most powerful person in the room.
First-time storyteller. Is she from the past or from the future? Her performances cross dimensions of time and subjects real and unreal. And she will leave you wondering, not everything that meets the eye is as it appears, causing captivating confusion and seduction. The tease of the Twilight Zone. Please welcome first-time storyteller, brave story, lean in, baby demure.
I am a dancer with nearly 20 years of training and experience, and I am finally the performer I always wanted to be. I probably don't need to tell you for you to know that dancing, especially classical ballet, takes a toll on the human body. Our bodies are not made to turn our legs out 90 degrees or carry our weight on the tips of our toes. But I think that's what makes it truly enchanting and mesmerizing. It defies the limits of the human body and requires strength and training similar to a sport, all while maintaining the movement and storytelling of performance art. So my dance journey started when I was the young age of 3, when all I could do was just dream of being a ballerina in a tutu and pointe shoes, especially when the most I could do was just clap and skip around the dance studio. But even then, I knew I wanted the dancer life so badly. I continued to advance, and slowly my teachers helped train my body to stretch, bend, breathe, and even think like a dancer. When I reached the age of 10 years old, I had teachers begin to see my potential as a young dancer. And by this age, I started dancing on pointe, became part of my first pre-professional ballet company, began auditioning for special dance workshops and conservatories, and began keeping a dance journal to write down all my choreography. But this was also the age when teachers started pushing me harder against the wall to reach my split and stretching my toes to the ground to get a prettier arch. And also the first time a teacher made me cry from yelling at me during a rehearsal for making a mistake. Rushman ballet teachers are crazy. But I kept looking up to the older dancers in the company and watching professional ballerinas and knew that I wanted to be where they were. I wanted it so bad. So I told myself, usually through gritted teeth from the teachers pushing my leg up higher and closer to my ear, worth it. By the time I was in high school, my discipline to reach my goal of a professional career was becoming more serious as my training and class schedule intensified, and I continued to audition for prestigious intensives and opportunities. My passion and artistry were maturing well and growing with my years of dedication. My muscles were sore every other day, but My leg finally got behind my head. My Russian teachers would be so proud. My feet looked so beat up from my point shoes. I was way too embarrassed to ever wear sandals, but at the same time, they were my secret badge of honor to the dedication to my art. And one day, I realized I wasn't going to get any taller, which to any normal teenage girl meant nothing. But to me and my chosen career was a bit of a hindrance. Most ballerinas were tall, with long, slender builds. And if you weren't tall, then you had to be petite in every other way. I began picking myself apart every day in ballet class more than I ever had before. Not only did I have to continue working on my technique, but I also had to work on how my body looked if I wanted to get the life I wanted, because I still wanted it so bad. I know it's cliche for me to say that I, a ballerina, had an eating disorder, but I did. I starved myself. I calorie counted. I chewed each bite 100 times to trick my body that I was eating more. I'd binge and then feel really bad about it the next day and just start all over again. But finally, after many years of training and starving myself and dreaming of a dance career, I made it into a professional company. I felt like I made it. My dance days only got longer, 6 days a week, 6 to 12 hours long, going through more point shoes, paid performances, and I was happy. More so, I was happy that I was good enough and fit enough to be dancing with the company. We were never allowed to say skinny or thin. We had to say fit. And being there still pushed me to continually be the best dancer I could be, which meant still pushing me physically to the limits more than I ever have in my life. Being part of the company, I knew it was even more important I maintained a fit body. I felt more in control of my eating disorder because I was actually trying to eat rather than starve myself. But as a trade-off, I would go to the gym for almost 2 hours after rehearsals. So after a 6 to 12 hour day at the studio, I would go straight to the gym, exhaust my body even further by hitting the Stairmaster, doing 100 sit-ups, use some other random strengthening machines, then finally call it a day. And this was my ballerina daily routine. And I was happy because I wanted this life so badly, and I made it. Until one day, there was a sharp pain in my shin, kind of like a shin splint, but worse. I popped my usual 4 ibuprofen and kept dancing, and iced it when I got home. But then the pain didn't go away the next day, so 4 more ibuprofen, danced on it, and then iced when I got home. Still hurt the next day. Ibuprofen, dance rehearsal, ice when I got home. But then the pain got to the point where I couldn't even jump on it anymore. So I did the scariest thing a dancer could do. Go ask the doctor about the pain. It's so scary because the diagnosis could be the difference between the end of a season or the end of a career for a dancer. So I made an appointment to see Dr. Z. All the company dancers with an injury went to see Dr. Z. And we did some scans. Dr. Z came back to me with the results and said, "Looks like you've been in pain for a while." But I just shrugged. We're used to dancing through the pain. But Dr. Z said I would have to stop dancing for a few months because it was a stress fracture in my shin that was traveling up to my knee. And although it was not a career-ending injury, I was devastated. Dancing was everything I knew how to do, how to be. And now I was just told I can't do it. Despite not being able to dance or do any kind of physical activity on my feet, the ballet company was still able to cast me in the holiday classic, The Nutcracker, that year. I was to be Mother Ginger. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the role of Mother Ginger, she's like this matronly character that has this big hoop skirt on, and all of her gingerbread children come out from underneath of it. And in this company's version of Mother Ginger, I would be sitting on top of a man's shoulders while wearing the hoop skirt, so it was perfect for an injured dancer. And although it was not ideal for me, I was still happy to be included and somewhat dance on stage. So after I rehearsed a dance one day with my bottom half and my gingerbread children, the ballet master pulled me aside in front of everyone in the middle of rehearsal and told me to lose a few pounds because they had a hard time getting the hoop skirt to fit on me, and because it's about time that I did. I smiled and nodded and agreed to what he said, but on the inside, my stomach dropped. I tried not to look at everyone around me, even though I could feel all their eyes on me. So many thoughts were swimming in my head as I tried to hold back tears of embarrassment as I walked away. Isn't that what the costume department is for? Can't they just let out the hoop skirt? He knows I can't do any kind of dancing or physical activity right now, right? I'm not even skinny enough to do Mother Ginger. Then I sat down on the side of the studio, on my ass, wearing my orthopedic boot, watching the rest of rehearsal, thinking about how I was going to walk out at the end of the day and never come back. But I told you at the beginning that this is the story of how I became the performer that I always wanted to be, and I am. It wasn't long after I walked away from the professional ballet company until I was begging to get back on a stage again. I told you, I've always wanted this life. I'm an artist, and I need to perform. But getting back to performing, I wanted to be sure that it was truly for me. Because although my passion for dancing has always been there, and it wasn't always bad, my reasons and goals grossly transformed over time. To make my teacher proud, to nail the audition, to satisfy the artistic director, to meet the choreographer's needs, leading to me feeling like a puppet. Not even good enough to be Mother Ginger on another dancer's shoulders. I used to feel like a washed-up ballerina that threw away years of dance training and a career. But I stand before you transformed and reclaimed my body and future as a burlesque performer. While many look down on stripping, through this new performance art, I've been able to connect with myself and others on both a vulnerable and empowering level that classical dance never could give me. Besides, burlesque is known as the art of the tease. I choose to let you see me in the way I want you to see me, when I want you to see me. Through burlesque, I've not only been able to still do ballet on my own terms, but I've learned through my peers and through my own transformation what it means to be in the body that I have and fall in love with it over and over again and show others what that looks like. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the hard work I do in burlesque today. I make my own costumes. I make my own choreography. I do my own hair and makeup. I am my own body of art. I wanted this so badly.
As a young man, he saw grown-up men wrestling a bear at a shopping center and trusted that the life-shaping event was a normal and common thing, sort of like quicksand. He could hardly wait for his bear wrestling muscles to come in when he too would be able to fight a bear at a Christmas time shopping center. He feels a bit cheated now that he's getting a bit of age. And it's starting to dawn on him that neither bear wrestling nor quicksand are all that common. Lean in. First time Roanoke Hoot and Hollerer, but a favorite already, Mark Sage.
Lewis Grizzard one time said that there is a difference between the word naked and naked. Naked, he said, means you ain't got no clothes on. Naked means you ain't got no clothes on and you're up to something. We was naked. Now bear in mind, this was nearly a quarter of a century ago, so we were younger, thinner, fitter, more lithe, and generally better looking naked and naked. My wife and I had just started our lives together, and freshly married, we had moved to this little patch of paradise that was hundreds of miles from civilization, surrounded on four sides by woods, and a quarter mile up this gravel driveway from the nearest neighbor's house. So being young and in love and new to this Garden of Eden, we did what was right and proper and natural. We got naked. And there was a hammock involved. Now, I don't know why I didn't hear the truck tires crunching on gravel, but I didn't. And if it would have been me, if I'd have been driving a Ford Ranger pickup, hauling four other grown men, and we happened upon a naked couple in a hammock in the middle of the woods, I believe I would have put that truck in reverse and eased on back to from where I came. But that's just me. That wasn't them. They put it in park. Kindly parallel to where we was in that hammock. My wife was the first to notice that we'd been noticed, to discover that we'd been discovered. And brother, she come out of that hammock like a streak. I followed her for a couple steps until it dawned on me that I couldn't very well abandon new house and new home and fashion clothes out of fig leaves and spend the rest of my days there in the forest. For one, there ain't no fig trees growing in the mountains of Southwest Virginia. And for two, even if there was, it'd be mighty cold come the wintertime wearing nothing but fig leaf clothing. There ain't a whole lot of insulation value in that type of material from what I understand. So I stopped and I turned around and I started making my way back down the hill for where that truck was parked. Now, in the driver's side was a great big giant of a man, and beside him in the passenger seat was a smaller, littler feller, and in the back there were three grown men of various sizes. As I approached the truck, the driver, the big one, opened up his door and planted his feet on the ground. And he twisted himself out from behind the wheel and started standing up. And he just kept on standing and standing and standing and standing till he was good and done, all 6'4", 6'5" of him. And then he reached out his hand and grabbed hold of mine and gave it a shake. And even at the time, I felt like that was bizarre behavior. He introduced himself as my neighbor, and the smaller little fella there in the passenger seat as his neighbor, and the three grown men in the back of the bed as their sons. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said. I thanked him kindly, and I told him the same thing, and I meant it. Then he told me that he'd been hunting in them woods since he was just a wee littling, and he was wondering, and he apparently had to know that day, that very instant, if he could continue to do so. I told him maybe not today. Eventually, we got around to the part of the conversation where we bid our farewells and said our goodbyes, and he started twisting himself back into that truck. And as he got himself situated, he looked over at me and invited me to church. I told him I didn't allow it to do much good. And then he told me he'd pray for me. I told him the same thing, but I didn't mean it. And I don't believe he did either. Because if he did, then prayers didn't get much past the roof of that Ford Ranger pickup. Unless he was praying for the exact opposite of what I wanted, which was to get back in that hammock. He put the truck into gear and he drove it off down the hill, and I watched it as it disappeared down the driveway, and tires crunching on the gravel. And then I turned and walked back up into the woods to fetch my wife. But the moment, as they say, had passed. We realized that we were no longer naked, but we were naked. And we hunted around for clothes to cover up our nakedness. Over the years, that neighbor continued to hunt up in there, but he's an old man now. His body done plumb give out, so he don't come around anymore. Nobody much does, so that leaves us there in our own little corner of Eden, all by ourselves. But the sin of it is over the past 20-some odd years, I've growed into a body ain't nobody wants to see naked or naked. And worse still, that hammock is long, long gone.
I mean, for reals, y'all. Amazing. Drove 2 hours to be here with his beautiful wife from the hammock. I won't point her out, but she's still here. So you can see why I need Mark and the Hoot and Holler family ASAP. Okay, let's collect ourselves. Next storyteller. A first-time Hoot and Hollerer, but certainly not a novice storyteller. She's a former longtime resident of the Roanoke Valley, now lives on a remote island 26 miles from the coast of North Carolina. She's the author of a recently released memoir, The Wounds That Bind Us, which is out in the lobby. Get it. You're going to want to after this. Which tells the improbable and powerful true story of a single mother with prosthetic legs who travels the globe with her young daughter in a Land Rover to bring light to the plight of landmine survivors in war-torn countries. Her writing has been published in many places, including the New York Times, but she believes that her most important work has been raising her 2 children to become kind and compassionate members of the human family. I am beyond honored to welcome Kelly Shin.
I want y'all to know that that's Shin with 2 N's and no shins. Can't make that up. Long before I became legless or knew that I would become a writer, I knew that words mattered, that they mattered more than limbs, that words are more than a simple mode of communication, but that they are ways to wield power in the forms of love, compassion, and sometimes cruelty. I was born with legs, an orphan with legs, and I don't know the story of my birth except that I was born to a 15-year-old girl at a home for unwed mothers at the tail end of the baby scoop era. 3 decades of American history in which an estimated 4 million young women were shamed into secrecy and had their babies sold as commodities. I've never forgotten the first time I came across my adoption papers and saw the words that mattered: receipt for full payment of Caucasian female infant, $250. I like to imagine my birth. I like to imagine a nun catching me as I flop from my birth mother's vagina. I like to imagine her counting all 10 of my toes in Latin, wiggling each one while reciting the rhyme about piggies who stay home, eat roast beef, have none. Unos porcos, duo porcos, tres porcos. Do you know that the Latin word for pig, porcos, also refers to gluttony and the female genitalia? When I started to speak, I had an impediment. I struggled to pronounce many letters, particularly R's and L's, and my adoptive parents took me to a Norman Rockwellian doctor who told them, "You probably bought yourself an Irish orphan. A lot of them are tongue-tied." Then he had my adoptive mother hold me down while he pulled out my tongue with some tongs and cut the lingual frenum, the string of tissue that connects the underside of the tongue to the floor of the mouth. Frenum comes from the Latin word for bridle. That doctor unbridled me, made sure that when I found my voice, I would speak so that people could understand. I tasted blood for days. My father used to say that when I was young and learning to read, I'd find a new word and hide in the closet and say it repeatedly, and then I'd come out and try to use it in a sentence. I remember loving the word pocket, the way it felt on my frenum-freed tongue. I loved pockets too, especially on overalls. Pocket is a diminutive Anglo-Norman word that means little pouch. I have a pocket in my brain that I fill with words, and sometimes it gets too full and spills into the reservoir of my heart. The bigger I got, the bigger words were added to the pocket. At 16, I learned the word histrionic, meaning exaggeratedly dramatic. One day, I was a star cross-country runner, and the next, I ran a fever of 104 and felt like I was going to die in an emergency room. I was scared and loud, and the doctor sent me home with Tylenol and wrote in the medical chart, histrionic teenage girl with the flu. 12 hours later, I had purple patches all over my body, and a spinal tap at a second hospital revealed that I had acquired bacterial meningitis and sepsis. And then, the same month that the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed into law, I had my legs amputated. It was hard enough to be a 16-year-old girl in the dawn of Victoria's Secret and the heyday of Jeffrey Epstein. It was exquisitely harder with freshly amputated pins. In the world of romance, though, disability is a wonderful bullshit detector. To be crippled means that you can part the sea of shallow people like Moses. If you flinch at my use of the word cripple, I get it. It's historically a derogatory term. But etymologically speaking, it simply means to have difficulty walking. I like the simplicity of that definition as much as I like the alliteration. Cripple, pocket. You gotta love those plosives and fricatives. And even though being a crippled teenage girl weeds out the shallows, it doesn't keep you from losing your virginity to rape by a stranger in the back parking lot of a bar 20 years before you learn that disabled women are victims of sexual assault at 3 times the rate of women without disability. But your love for new words and your inherent will to live will also find you lovers that see that what you have lost in the flesh you have gained in the soul. Lovers that know that the humble house is often filled with more love than any mansion. After my legs were amputated, I replaced running with racing, specifically off-road racing. I replaced 2 legs with a 4x4. Eventually, I worked for a year as an off-road instructor in England, and one day I met a man whose bravado and wit humored me, and over a pool table, we made a bet about a date, and I sunk the white ball on purpose. He lived about an hour away, and so I rented a hotel room and traveled his direction, and I didn't tell him about the hotel room, but I also hadn't told him about my legs. You see, back then, I wore boots and jeans and went to great lengths to hide my prosthetics because it was still the heyday of supermodels with no visible disabilities. And even though I was never going to walk down a runway in a miniskirt, I was going to hide the fact that I couldn't. We'd planned to meet at a pub in the town square, and as I was walking toward it, I found myself wanting to turn back. Despite all the excuses I was making in my head for why this was a bad idea, Truth is that I was frightened to tell this man with whom I had a genuine connection and attraction that I had no legs. I was frightened that I'd come this far and that after I told him, he would spend an hour in polite small talk, then bow out with a bad excuse and ghost me. So he's at the bar when I walk in and his eyes catch mine, and I can see that he's also making a vulnerable leap toward connection. So we drink some beer and avoid the hard heart talks, instead choosing to laugh and entertain an inebriated redhead. At some point in the night, Date had bought me 2 beers and Redhead bought me 3, but Redhead, she spilled the third one on us both and then suddenly became distracted by the music and left us to dance. And that's when I found the nerve, or numbed the nerve enough, to tell Date about my legs. He said he'd had no idea, that he suspected I may have worn a knee brace, and he was curious and kind and a little buzzed himself, and so I left him to soak it up. And I took another beer to the dance floor where Redhead and I shook the bones we had. Date eventually joined us, and when he pulled me in close for a kiss under those disco lights, I knew we were golden, and I also knew that I was drunk. So the pub shouts last call, and I hear last fall, and we stumble out the door onto this cobblestone road where Date spots a man who looks just like him, and I begin to feel dizzied by the swirling lights reflected in the cobblestones. I hear him shout to the man, "Brother, how are ya? This is the American bird I was telling you about." The man hugs Date and looks at me from over Date's shoulder and says, "Oh, legless." I get a sinking feeling in my gut and start stumbling away back toward the hotel, feeling all hurt. By the time Date catches up with me and takes my arm in his own to keep me steady, my anger subsides. When he walks me to my hotel room and kisses me in the elevator, I forget entirely about the cobblestones, the legless comment, the fear. And when I wake in his arms in the light of a sunspoke, after hours and hours of unbridled, freedom-filled passion, I remember the swirling lights and I slap him in the chest. He sputters awake, surprised by the slap, gives me what for, and I ask him, "How did he know I was legless? Who was that man? You said you didn't know. Were you lying?" Date leans back laughing while my heart is in my throat. "Dear one," he says between chuckles, "in jolly old England, to be legless means you're drunk." I love humor, which I often refer to as the helpmate of hope. What do you call a woman with one leg? Eileen. What do you call a woman with no legs? It don't matter, she ain't coming anyway. I've told these jokes countless times now that I've discarded the pretense and the boots, and I've learned to present my body without shame. And yet there are still times in certain situations when I try to hide my comfort in this body because I know how much words matter. Since the beginning of affirmative action, most applications in American life require you to fill out questions relating to demographics, race, gender, sexual preference, disability. And even though these forms are meant to protect vulnerable persons, I've always cowered at them, despised them for reasons unclear, refused to fill them out except for the race question, where I always draw a little box, check it, and write next to it the category of human. The word human comes from the late Middle English, meaning humane, to have or show compassion or benevolence. That's a word worth sticking in your pocket. To be a disabled woman is to know what it is to be treated inhumanely. In 2012, the United Nations recognized that women with disabilities are at a considerably greater risk of violence, neglect, and exploitation. That nearly 80% of disabled women will be the victim of sexual violence in their lifetimes. That a quarter of disabled mothers are likely to lose custody of their children, have a more difficult time finding adequate housing, gainful employment. The list goes on as long as human cruelty. And the fact that I have experienced all these statistical hardships on some level unnerves me. It takes me to a sorrowful place, one that is raw and legless and vulnerable. It lays me bare before the death wall. These questionnaires that are meant to protect so-called vulnerable people also set them up for abhorrent cruelty. When the United Nations creates a program to help end violence against disabled women, they must also define them. A professor from the University of Massachusetts who specializes in genocide says that by their very nature, these definitions create a human subgroup, and this is the realm where human devaluation begins. He wrote that when devaluation becomes a part of a culture, its literature, art, and media, and perpetuated in social institutions, it becomes highly resistant to change. Even when its public expression is quiet, it remains part of the deep structure of that culture and can reemerge when a scapegoat or ideological enemy is needed. This is as true for folks with disabilities as it is for African Americans, the LGBTQIA community, for Jews, Palestinians, and even white men. Any among us who bear any distinctive marks of identity, which is all of us. Do you remember The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss? It's a story about creatures called Sneetches who live on beaches. Some Sneetches have stars on their bellies while others do not. A sly character named McMonkey McBean offers a machine to add or remove stars, causing confusion and rivalry among the Sneetches. In the end, they learn a valuable lesson about the silliness of prejudice and the importance of acceptance. I think about the Sneetches a lot whenever I read the news. I think about hopelessness in the light of continued genocide. I quote Dr. Seuss out loud to the headlines. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars and whether they had one or not upon theirs. I think about the female astrophysicist who discovered in the late 1950s that all the elements of Earth, including humans, are composed of the elements that come from stars, that we are all made of stardust. I think that on the next forum I am asked to fill out, I'll draw a box and I'll create a new race. I'll call it Stardust. Star, a word in my pocket that matters, a word that comes from the Greek aster, a word that means heavenly body.
Gorgeous story. So glad that she came here from Ocracoke, from her island, to be with us tonight. Supreme effort. And don't forget her book is out there in the lobby too, The Wounds That Bind Us. So beautiful. Oh my goodness. All right, here we go. We have 3 more gorgeous things. Gorgeous things. All right. We have another first-time storyteller. So I thought that the cast, and I say cast, like I thought we had all of our storytellers lined up, and then I got a note from this fellow, and there was no way that I was going to say no. I'm just going to leave it at that. He's 36. He's an economist, but currently on disability. His hobbies are pool and writing op-ed essays that flow like philosophical poetry. And it's true. He's a beautiful writer, a beautiful storyteller with a super brave first-time story, leaning in for Matt Kiesler.
Hooters and Hollerers. Growing up, I was a pretty normal kid. I went to public school, I played and loved sports, and when told I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up, promptly replied, then I want to be a Ninja Turtle. There were 2, let's call them oddities, about my body as a kid. The first was how skinny I am. Today I am 6 feet tall, yet I've never weighed more than 125 pounds. The second is I have what's called pectus carinatum. Now, for those of you whose Latin may be a bit rusty, that means protruding sternum bone. Now, that pulls my shoulders forward, making it look like I have a hunched back. While both of these things are certainly merited their fair share of childhood bullying, they're both also minor, surface level, aesthetic. they didn't affect my development. That was true until 20 years ago at the high school that stands 1 mile from this very building. The thumb on my dominant hand stopped being able to pinch things. It stopped being opposable. When that didn't go away, my mom took me to UVA, where they did some genetic testing, and it was discovered that I have a rare, aggressive form of a neuromuscular condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth, or CMT. CMT affects the periphery nerves, which control the extremities, so think hands, arms, legs, feet. Think of the body like a giant meat robot. The periphery nerves are the wires that carry the electric signal from your brain to whatever part it's trying to move. CMT patients have old iPhone chargers for periphery nerves. See, you already know. So what happens over time is that nerve, the exterior casing of it, starts to fray and decay, exposing the conductor. And as that happens, the signal that your brain is trying to send to whatever it's moving gets weaker and weaker. And once the nerve is too damaged, the signal can't get there at all, and that corresponding muscle atrophies and dies. Now, unlike iPhone users, CMT people cannot order replacement nerve cells in bulk on Amazon. So there are currently no treatments or medications that can cure or slow down the progression of the disease. Now, I don't have much memory of that UVA appointment. I know he told me that CMT patients usually lead normal lifespans and that it wouldn't affect my brain, which I'm a bit fond of in a pseudo-narcissistic kind of way. But I must have blacked out somewhere along the line of he may not walk by the time he's 30. What I do remember is being conscious enough, once we were back in the parking lot, to leverage the emotionally traumatic moment we just endured to get my mom to buy me Taco Bell on the way home. Now that moment stands out to me because it was the beginning of a decade-long denial. Nothing they had told me made any sense. How would I not be able to walk in 10 years when I just ran a 9-minute mile in gym last week? I'm fine. My thumb just stubbornly doesn't want to work. No big deal. That was the story that I was consciously telling myself. Subconsciously, I was terrified. Not so much terrified of the what-ifs regarding my body, again, denial, but terrified of the opportunities that seemed like they were closing. Suddenly, I'd never had the safety net of doing something like joining the military to create educational or career opportunities. I'd never work a labor-intensive blue-collar job. I'd never play sports as an adult. I'd never, this is the hard one, I'd never be a Ninja Turtle. But I was most terrified of how people would perceive me. Now, I already personified this scrawny, niche, nerd archetype in a culture that often associates manliness with capableness. So I became haunted with paranoia of what desirable romantic partner is going to want to be with a man who is disabled like this. And that toxic mentality would define me for several years. I prioritized relationships and active experiences above everything else, including school and career. I allowed a local orthopedic surgeon who expressed a fraudulent familiarity with my disease to talk me into having a reconstructive surgery on my hand to fix my thumb, which proved to be a disastrous decision because it didn't fix anything it was supposed to and exaggerated the atrophy so much that it required a second surgery 2 years later just for me to be able to open my hand again. Today, what was once my dominant hand is now a largely useless decoration that can't hold a glass or perform a handshake or even comfortably hold this microphone. Now, the silver lining to that is that during the rehab for my second surgery, I discovered I have a great passion and natural aptitude for the game of pool. It's like the universe gave me an outlet for my love of sports and married it to a tight-knit community that I needed much more than I realized. Pool would take me all over the country and give me tons of relationships and ridiculous stories that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. When I went back to school to get my degree in my late 20s, I even tied for 13th in the country in the National Nine-Ball Championship. Thank you. Now, I would love to be able to tell you that a decade of having a community and going back and getting a bachelor's degree, falling in and out of love a couple of times, and lots of therapy led to the kind of healthy acceptance of my disease that brought me here to speak to you today. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The cause of this particular metamorphosis was the progression of the disease itself. When I was 31, I felt a kink in my lower left lumbar that made my entire left leg go numb, like it had fallen asleep. I couldn't lift my foot from the ankle. No amount of heat or stretching seemed to restore feeling or function. So I went to the hospital the next day with fears of blood clots and slipped discs at the forefront of my brain. I paid for an emergency room visit and an MRI, only for everything to show that I was seemingly healthy. It wasn't until the on-call neurologist happened to glance at my chart and passively say, you have CMT, that caused the realization to hit me like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, I was awash in all the feelings of that initial diagnosis appointment. I felt so stupid that my denial was so deeply ingrained that I hadn't even considered CMT as the possible cause for what was going on, when it was so obviously the most likely cause. And if this was CMT, that was it. I would never be able to lift my foot from the ankle again. That realization, and the realization of how that would change my life going forward, caused me to break down and start crying in that hospital parking lot. And for the first time in 15 years, really internalize and accept what having this disease would mean. Now, Taco Bell didn't have the same novelty as it did when I was a teenager. So when I was done crying this time, naturally I splurged on Arby's. It has been 5 years since I broke down in that parking lot. Today, I have to wear a fancy space-age carbon fiber brace for my foot drop. My right side hasn't been plagued by the same big instant loss as my left. It's been more of a steady, slow decay. But I anticipate in the next 5 years that I will likely need the same kind of brace for my right foot, and that in the next 10 or so, I'll likely lose the ability to reach out and grasp things with my right hand as well. About a year into my current relationship, after watching me compulsively stretch my fingers and not even be able to lay down without having a heavy weighted blanket at the foot of my bed to push my foot up against, my current partner asked me, "Are you just always in pain?" Now, I thought about it for a second. I didn't want to scare her off. So I said, "I'm always uncomfortable. But the truth is, in a way, I am always in pain. It's just a bit more nuanced than that." CMT pain is hard to explain because normal people never experience anything like severe muscle atrophy or death. If a normal person experiences muscle atrophy, it's usually because they had some kind of surgery where they couldn't use that appendage or whatever for a couple months, and then they're just going to experience some extra soreness as they build it back up. With CMT, there is no building back up. Once that bridge is broken, there's no repairing it, and that muscle is going to wither and die. And that creates a sort of dull, hollow throb. If you've ever been claustrophobic, just imagine being trapped in a space that's a little too tight. After a while, all you can think about is how badly you want to stretch. How great it would feel to stretch. But you can't. And that's not all, because as that muscle is dying, the surrounding muscle groups all try to pick up its slack. So then you get the kind of hot, cramping, aching associated with overexertion wrapped around that dull, hollow throb. It's truly an exquisite form of torture, and that says nothing of the mental stress of going through all that in progressive fashion, so it gets worse the older you get. I like to say that CMT takes the human experience of a midlife crisis, of the realization that we're all trapped in these decaying bodies, and then compounds and exaggerates it into a potent distillation of hopelessness and impotence. Speaking of mental health, I'm not just here to vent to an empathetic audience. I'm here to pass on some of the wisdom that I've gleaned through the trials that have been my physical existence. And that is that none of our choices or circumstances or experiences exist in a vacuum. We live in a universe built on a foundation of chaos. Tons of things are going to happen to each and every one of us that are completely unknowable and completely unavoidable, just like my CMT. But it's also a universe defined by laws like gravity that compel a cosmic balance to all things. So, I may have been bullied for being the skinniest kid growing up, but that also meant that I've never had to exercise any kind of restraint in regards to what foods I eat, and that my friend Kim is always sending me home yummy treats to trying to fat me up. My chest may look alien and weird, but it also gives me an expanded diaphragm that allows me to have greater respiratory endurance. And my girlfriend has discovered, to her sheer delight, that its form factor is ribbed for her pleasure and can function like a Sibian. Now, for those of you who don't know what a Sibian is, feel free to ask one of your kinky, cackling neighbors after the show. With CMT, the list of negatives that it's given me are extensive, but even it has given me many positives. It's taught me not to worry about eventualities. The things you worry about rarely happen, and even when they do, they rarely happen in circumstances that you thought about or prepared for. It's taught me to identify and avoid the toxic fake it till you make it mentality. It's taught me the value of raw, open, vulnerable communication, because when you're disabled like this, there are always going to be things that you need to ask for help with. As I examine the man I am today, it's clear to me that CMT has shaped nearly every facet of my personality. And it turns out it's this very personality that allowed me to shed the incel fears that haunted me when I was younger and attract the greatest love of my life, who is in the audience and stands as the inspiration for why I'm standing here today, because she's been dying to see me do stand-up for several years. I love you, Megan. My closing advice is this. The next time you feel like you're drowning in a sea of negativity, try to zoom out from focusing on your personal tree and examine the forest around you. Look for the positives. They will be there. The old idiom is wrong. What doesn't kill us does not make us stronger, or doesn't necessarily make us stronger. Growth doesn't mean healing all the pain and scars and trauma. It just means accepting that those things happened and allowing that acceptance to change the shape of our individual trajectories to try to lead the best life possible going forward. I truly believe that the meaning of life is to live it and enjoy it. And it's so much more enjoyable when you're swimming with the prevailing tide than when you're trying to swim against it, just because that's a direction a past version of yourself thought it was supposed to be going. You guys have been great. Thank you so much.
What a beautiful, brave story. Okay, we have two more. And here we go. Okay, here's another 11th hour. It's like a person that goes, this is a terrible analogy, but somebody that goes to an animal shelter and just loves all the animals and wants to adopt them all. That's a terrible analogy, but anyway, 3 weeks ago, I was the keynote speaker at the Roanoke Regional Writers Conference, which was a ridiculous honor, and I was having like imposter syndrome the whole time and felt like mortified and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I did it. And I loved it, and I loved taking the workshops and meeting people. And our next storyteller is someone that I met there. And she literally said like 3 sentences to me that stuck with me. Again, I thought we were already packed with storytellers. We were done. I could not possibly fit another. And I was like, I got to reach out. I got to do this. So that's how this happened. And I'm thrilled that it did. She loves selling at flea markets and wearing many hats, literally. She is a master recycler. She loves to laugh and is very frank, and that is true. She loves honesty and minions. She's worked really hard on this, and this is taking a beautiful and supreme effort for her to be here. And this is an extra lean in for Karen Marie.
I'll be speaking tonight about a body part. It is the voice. 70 years ago, when I was 7, I stood on a stage to sing with the church's children's choir and proceeded to throw up and poop my pants, thus ending my dreams of a performance career before it ever really started. You see, and here I was born with a really deep voice. I was born with this voice that you hear today. My mother would take me and my sister down to this little grocery store, and the owner would ask me, he'd get a big chuckle out of this, "What's your name, little girl?" And I said, "My name is Harry." Problem is, he would get a laugh, but my name is Karen, and I was 3 years old, so I had that voice. That's me when I was 7. Now, going through the growing up years, and so that little girl had this voice. Now, going through the growing up years, I remember being laughed at, bullied, and made to feel bad about my voice as I attempted to sing like all the other girls during the rock and roll years. I remember in 2nd grade being asked by the singing teacher if I had had my adenoids out, because they didn't know what was coming out here. Junior high, I joined the pep chorus. They had me sing one day alto, one day soprano. They didn't know what to do with this voice. A girl did not sing boys' parts back then. And guys, they did not want to date a girl whose voice was deeper than theirs. In school, I could not stand up in front of a class. You know, when they ask you to do whatever. Remembrance of that first choir results was always in my head and my stomach. And so went my life until 1989. My minister at church asked some of us to give a short 10-minute talk. And he asked me, and he knew about my stomach upsets and stuff. And he told me, he said, "Karen," he said, "it's already done." And that's what it was meant to be. I was supposed to get up there then. For the first time in my life, I relaxed and did it. Afterwards, a woman who I knew to be the choir director came up to me. And she said, "I want your voice." I said, "Lady, you can have this voice. I don't want this voice." She said, "No, I need deep voices for the choir." I said, "I can't sing." I said, "Everybody laughs at me singing." So she said, "You know, that's just another muscle. It needs to be exercised." I said, "Okay." So we walked off, and she said, "Try out for me." So I ducked her for weeks, One day she caught up with me, and she said, "I thought you were going to try out for the choir." I said, "Yeah." And I said, I opened my mouth, this busy, that busy, whatever. And then I said, "What about 3 o'clock this afternoon?" She said, "Yeah. Here's my address. Come to my house." So I went to her house. She gave me a nice hot cup of tea, set me down. And then she went over and sat on the piano bench. She said, "Come here." So I did. And she said to me, "What would you like to sing?" I said, you know. And then I said, "How about Amazing Grace?" I mean, she said, "How about Amazing Grace?" And I said, "How about Amazing Grace?" Yeah, that's a song that goes up and down, up and down. She said, "Okay, what can you sing?" So I thought back to my Baptist childhood, and I said, "How about Rock of Ages?" You know that one? That's real simple. So I sang Rock of Ages with her, and I warbled, and at the end she said, "Oh, you're in the choir." I said, "Oh." So I went to the first rehearsal. She put me with tenors. If any of y'all know anything about music, tenors is a high guy's voice. So I struggled with that for weeks, and my throat hurt real bad and everything. Then one day I heard this really nice, deep voice off to the right of me. And I said, "Who's that?" And they said, "That's Norm." I said, "What is he singing?" "Baritone bass." I asked her, I said, "Can I go stand with him?" "Yes, you can." So that was 35 years ago, and I've been singing baritone bass ever since under the same choir director. I love my voice, and someone finally recognized that I do not have a girl's voice, and she has let me sing with that voice I was born with. Amen. 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 Amen.
Y'all, Karen Marie. I begged her to sing and she said no, and there she is. So beautiful. Oh my gosh. So again, you can see why I said yes. Okay, last storyteller. Again, another first timer. Somebody sort of tagged him in a post because I put out kind of a casting call, and then he wrote me just kind of a blurb, and I was like, "I'm in love, yes." So that's how it happens. Okay. He's a husband and father of 2 boys, Jacob, 21, and Matthew, 17. He's an educator and a writer of both short fiction and poetry. When he's not working or writing, he enjoys making music with his friends and bandmates in the group Western Justice. He also produces The Shade Tree Poet, a podcast featuring his stories and poems. This is his very first time, and won't be the last, participating in Hoot and Holler. Please welcome Kurt Alderson.
I want to start there actually with a word on luck, because I've often thought of myself as being someone who has dumb luck. Not bad luck, just dumb luck. But last year turned out to be a great year for good luck. And I'm here to tell you about an opportunity that came my way last year. It started over breakfast with an old friend of mine, a guy I've known since I was 5 years old, and someone who I love very dearly, and who is really more like a brother than a friend. He had not had great luck, and that's really putting it mildly. He'd been fighting colon cancer, stage 3 colon cancer, for about 5 years. You wouldn't know what to look at him. I mean, he'd weathered everything. He'd been through like a champ, and he'd been through a lot. And he beat it. He beat colon cancer, only to find out that the cancer had moved to his liver. And his doctor explained that a transplant was not an option for him. In fact, whenever cancer was present, that's just not a procedure that anybody did. So you can imagine that drive home. We've shared a lot through the years, my buddy and me. We dated the same girl, not at the same time. We did. Another thing that we shared and still share is a love of old school country music. And there's an old song that has the line, "Miracles appear in the strangest of places." And it's true. It's true. Couple days after his doctor had delivered the bad news to him, same doctor was driving around, happened to be listening to a podcast. They happened to have a guest on there from Johns Hopkins who happened to be talking about the fact that Hopkins had made some real advances in that procedure. Advances that meant that folks with liver cancer now were viable candidates for transplants. He said that they could sort of improve their odds with a living donor, but they'd done it. They'd done it, I think, at that point in time, maybe 3 or 4 times successfully. So, doctor calls my friend calls his brother. His brother turns out to not be a match. He calls his sister, not a match. A couple other people step up, get tested, they're not matches. And he's relaying all of this to me over breakfast, and I came out with what seemed to be an obvious question. You know, what do I have to do to get tested? And he immediately tried to talk me out of it, but it just seemed like a no-brainer to me. And we were just really at that point talking about being tested. There's so many things that have to line up, a million variables. And there was, a chance that I wouldn't be able to come through for him. Plus, we both knew about my long-standing love affair with the drink. And I told him, I said, man, they may get one look at my liver, decide it looks like potted meat, and game over. That's not what happened. Took a trip to Baltimore. The first one was to meet the transplant team. They screened me for competency and soundness of mind. And I pulled it off. Couple more visits, and it's imaging. There's a lot of blood work, echocardiogram, X-rays. Fairly routine stuff. But everything was lining up. All the boxes were getting checked off. And next thing you know, we've got a date certain for our procedures. We still weren't in the clear, though, because on the day of the procedures, what the doctors would do is they would take my friend back first. They would take samples of tissue from his lymph nodes around the liver, and if there was any sign of cancer in the lymph nodes, they'd sew him up, and we'd go home. Now, these things, if you've had surgery, they start like obscenely early, like way before dawn. I think we got a picture of us checking it. Yeah, that's us right there. And if you thought, like when you first saw that, oh, that's 2 dudes at a urinal, you're fine. You're not alone in that. Our wives thought the same thing. That's why they snapped the pic. But those are kiosks. And so we finish checking in. We get prepped and everything. My friend goes back. And while I'm waiting, I fell asleep. I'm not a morning person. It was early. But they woke me up to give me the good news that the tests had come back clean. And they said there was a little celebration that had erupted in the OR when the surgical team got the news. So down the hall I go into my ER, bright lights, stainless steel everywhere. Also a party vibe in there too. I mean, it was a joyous thing and a lot of smiling faces. I was smiling. And they administered the anesthesia. I drifted far, far away. And they got to work. They tell me the procedure was long. That's what they tell me. And they ended up removing like 60% of my liver. I mean, it took 2 hands to like lift the thing out. I've got video, everything. But the liver it's a crazy organ. It's the only organ in the human body that regenerates, kind of like a lizard's tail, you know? And so 8 weeks later, I was whole, you know, I was fine. The surgeries, both his and mine, just went without a hitch. We spent about a week in the hospital healing up, walking the halls and stuff, eating Jell-O. Another week in the area, in the Baltimore area, you know, just in the event that something funky happened and we had to go back, but it didn't. And so then we go home. One thing I learned about my friend through this process, now again, I've known him since I was 5, right? I thought I knew everything about this guy. I found out just how private a dude he is. I mean, I haven't used his name, right? So I say that so you'll know that we really kept everything on the down low. There just weren't a lot of people that knew about it, what was going on. And when we got home, that had changed. We live in a kind of a small community, and word had gotten out, and that was fine by us. Since that time, this was September of last year. Since that time, I've had a number of folks come up to me and ask me about the experience, and I'm always happy to talk to them about it for a few reasons. First off, you know, this is brand new stuff, and I think it's important that people know that folks with liver cancer can now receive transplants. It's a thing, you know. I also like to talk about it because I know that it was a real life miracle, and I watched it, and I got to be a part of it, and I'm very, very grateful for that, and it's just something that it's very meaningful to me and very uplifting. That's a word I use a lot, uplifting. So I like to tell folks about it for that reason. And it never fails. This is another reason I like to tell a story, because it never fails. When I tell a story, somebody will say, well, I couldn't do a thing like that. I don't think I could do that. And I try to gently challenge that position, because I believe that our capacity to serve one another in the spirit of love, that's something that runs deep in all of us. I mean, think about all that you've seen tonight. I think you got, yeah, for real. And you've got it too, you know. I'll leave you with this. If somewhere down the line, let's say an opportunity comes your way and it's something that is maybe just a little bit outside of your comfort zone, maybe a lot, remember tonight. Remember the stories and the strength and the courage that these folks have displayed. And rather than allowing doubt and fear to send you running in the opposite direction, if that opportunity comes up, give it some thought, some thoughtful consideration. Because odds are you're capable of a lot more than you may realize. And if you do step out on faith and act in the spirit of love, there's a good chance you'll find yourself smack dab in the middle of the opportunity of a lifetime, just like I did. How lucky is that? Thank you.
This concludes it somehow. Thank you all for sticking around. Can you all believe the journey we just took tonight? I can't. You know, I have the privilege of knowing the stories in advance and working with each person kind of behind the scenes and helping to get these things ready. And then these people meet each other one time, and then we just form this instant family. And then we get to share that with y'all. And so it's just my greatest privilege and honor to get to to walk aside these beautiful, brave humans in birthing these stories. I mean, there's no other way to put it. These stories are birthed into the world, right? So thank you all for sticking around. Thank you for loving live storytelling. Thank you for understanding the importance of it, because it's so important. And as I always say, it's going to save the world.